Okay. Well, hopefully I have returned. Hopefully nothing goes wrong here. Um, a couple more people filtered in, which is great to see. So we're going to dive in tonight with Chris McKaig of Lamont Sports Management. Chris is a wealth of information, both locally and internationally, and is a FIFA licensed agent that's going to be sharing maybe some tips, some tricks, some avoid these moments, dispel some myths, and really try and educate everyone here tonight, really around uh, how the professional game operates, how to get a contract if there's a contract on the table, what you should be looking for in terms of if you're exploring working with agents or what that looks like at the next level. Chris is no stranger to the soccer scene in Calgary. He's been a TD at a couple of clubs. He's worked in many of them, and I'm sure is a very recognizable face for many people on the call. We're really, really, really delighted to be able to share a lot of information with you tonight. I would ask that if you've got questions, please put them in the chat, and I will look to operate that and pass them along to Chris at certain intervals and segments. And you'll notice that we've disabled both the camera and mic function for everyone, largely to make sure that our bandwidth stays up, right? And the webinar doesn't crash or it doesn't lag. So more than happy to answer questions at any moment. And if you can just put those into the chat, that would be fantastic. Chris, I've probably done you a massive disservice in terms of an introduction like that. I've probably missed a lot of things. But we've had the pleasure of working together both in the Rex programs, Western Canada Summer Games, as well as within the Calgary soccer scene for numerous years now. So really delighted to be able to share tonight with you, Chris, and happy that you've given us some time to hopefully help us all become 1% better tonight.
Thanks very much, Jordan. I appreciate you went above and beyond with the bio. So thanks for that. Also, for everybody on the call, thanks very much for giving up your evening. And I'll hopefully try and end this call with some information that can help you on the journey that you're on, either invested in the soccer community here in Calgary, or you have children or family, friends have children that are playing the game here. I know Jordan well, as he's mentioned, from many years being involved in soccer in Calgary. We actually we got to know each other way back when we were doing a B license together. That was many moons ago. But I really appreciate and admire all what Jordan's doing, and also CMSA, and how they're trying to educate as many people as they can about the game, what to look for, and really what to prioritize. So I'm delighted to be able to be here today to share. And if you've got any questions, I'd love to help answer them. I'm likely not to know that many answers of some of the questions that you have, but I'll do my best to answer anything that you have. And I have a little presentation that I'll probably kick on with. If anybody has any concerns about it, please raise your hands or put a question into Jordan. He's going to keep me updated, because I won't actually be able to see if anybody's raising their arm at this point. But Jordan, just to make sure you're able to see the transition between the pages.
I can, yep. And I'd ask for maybe a couple of people as well. Can you see a new screen with a presentation on it? There's thumbs up all over the place. So it looks like some people have found the reaction button as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. So yes, Jordan mentioned a little career timeline himself. I won't bore you with too much about myself, but as been mentioned, I've worked in a number of clubs. I've held a few positions as well. And 2023, I'll go on to explain why. That was the year that I started Lamont Sports Management, but that was the year that I began taking that journey and that sidestep into the management side of players and how I can help with their development. And then this year was the first time that we placed both men and female players and both men and female coaches as well in the professional game. So I'll be able to go into some detail about that as we go. These are the topics that we will hopefully try and give you a wealth of information on, and apologies if there's not a wealth of information at the end. I'll be able to try and answer some questions on them, but we felt that it was good for us to stick to some of the things that might be current and useful for you as interested soccer people in the district of Calgary. The first topic I wanted to bring up to you was, what am I even mentioning being a FIFA agent for, and what does having FIFA agent regulations mean? Well, if I move on to the next slide, basically, in a nutshell, in 2022, they decided that there was not a standardized process for administration for agents. So agents were working maybe without knowledge of the game or without an understanding of the different laws that are required for moving between countries, and what was happening to clubs and families and players. They were getting exploited to, quite a high degree. So FIFA came up with new FIFA agent regulations, which meant in 2023, it was a mandate for all agents by September 30th that they had to pass a FIFA license. So the first license was was the 17th of April 2023, and from the second exam, which was in September, everybody that was trying to uphold a profession in the game as an agent, they have to pass their license. I was fortunate that in the first instance, I had passed my exam. I believe 75 agents across the country in Canada sat their exam. I don't know this number correctly, but I was told from a couple of sources that it was less than 25 had passed. So it is, a very extensive exam to pass. I felt like I got a little bit lucky on the first attempt. I had set aside a couple of years of trying to be able to pass this, and because the amount of information you need to know about employment law on different confederations and how that changes between employment law in Europe in relation to being an athlete, and how that's different in, say, Costa Rica, and who governs both of those differences, and having to know something about that was actually quite a challenge for me. But anyway, fast forward, there's licensed agents across the world, and then there's some unlicensed agents as well. So each of them can still operate, but when it comes to actually negotiating and getting deals over the line, you have to hold a valid FIFA license, and we are required each year to have professional courses that we have to pass each year. I think there's credits of 60, and each of the courses that you go on, they're worth 10 per course. So there's about 6 different exams you have to sit every year to be able to hold your license year to year. And then on top of that, which is really probably quite interesting for you that are all on the call, is that you need a second license to be able to operate with minors. So I actually passed that in 2024, because originally I had no intention of really helping too many players that were younger than 18 years old. And I felt that after actually working for about 6 months as an agent, the long-term viability of the business was definitely going to need to require me to have the working with minor certification. So that's why I've been able to do that, and also helps me be on this call as well with all of you. And down the bottom, this just might help your understanding of what the fee structure would work with an agent. It might be daunting for the small percentage of you that are perhaps on this call that require an agent for people that either children or family friends, is that the clubs pay the agent fees. So you as the family, you as the players, you actually don't pay for any of the services that an agent or an agency would offer. And those services will be different based on the agent or the agency that you work with. And the standardization is that we earn 5% of wages under $200,000 a year. And also we can earn 3% of wages above $200,000 a year. As well, we can earn from transfer fees and that is a 10% commission for any transfer fee that might be available. So there are kind of three ways where agents can earn some money as well. So a little bit about our business. This obviously is quite a new business, established in 2023. I didn't really have any intention of starting the agency so early on because I had no expectation of being able to pass the exam. It was all a lot of new information, new material for myself. I didn't really have any mentorship either, that I knew of anybody that was going to sit and try and pass the exam. Since then, I've actually had quite a lot of agencies reach out to me and ask me on their behalf to complete a deal or take on a player that they can't work with because nobody in their agency has the license, and you need to have somebody in your business that has the license. So in 2023, I set up the agency. Our focus was about trying to assist young footballers, male and female staff, and their clubs with their recruitment strategy. My own personal opinion is that whilst there is a fantastic avenue and pathway for players, probably on a global scale, there was an identification issue that I felt was available for us as an agency to kind of have a little bit of a niche where we have people working for our agency that understand the game, and their real expertise is in player identification. Therefore, we felt that there was perhaps players being unnoticed or talents that are hard to find. We really wanted to get involved and try and help them and make a difference that way. Fast forward, we're actually one of the largest qualified agencies in Canada. Without question, I think we're in the top 5 now. Although growth isn't really our main priority or principle. I think we're kind of capped right now at about 25 either players or staff members that we work with. And then the second from the right-hand side is our staff. So myself, I operate everything in North America for us. I have an agent in Scotland, an agent in South Africa, in Finland, and also because we deal with a lot of young players that are the ages between 18 and 24, 25 years old, we have a sports psychologist as well that we've hired as a service provider to our agency, who can go in there, help with the players. And I'll go on to explain the services we provide and why that would be important for you if you're looking for an agency at some point. So in the top part here, you can see a little summary of the type of players we have. And I would say that in terms of the players that we represent, 50-50 between female and male. As you're probably all aware, there's well, first and foremost, it's fantastic for the country and also for us in Calgary that we have a female professional team starting in 2025, and also a professional league in 2025 as well. And I feel that Canada will definitely be high on the list of destinations for players to come and live and visit at some point in their career. So really excited by that, and congrats to everybody involved in getting that off the ground in such a good manner. But the reason why we are about 50-50 is that there's so many opportunities out there for both genders to be able to set out in the world of being a professional footballer, or are current professional footballers and want to move between different destinations or want to level up within the same location. But this is an example of the type of people that we represent. Quite a few of these, we've had a very monumental part to play in their journey. For example, if I was to highlight Jasmine Hamid here, she's playing in the Damallsvenskan, which is the Sweden top league, and she actually plays for the 8th best team in Europe, and they play in the Champions League. They beat Chelsea, they tied Real Madrid, and also beat Paris Saint-Germain last year. And she was playing NCAA, had never been a professional footballer before, and it was through our connections actually that she managed to get out to Sweden, and yeah, she was playing for the best team in Sweden against some amazing clubs. So it's great to see that take place. And then, you know, you might be familiar with some of the names that are playing CPL. We have a local player, 17 years old, that's playing for Cavalry right now, Chanan Chanda. And then on the right hand side in the NCAA, We've got players that we don't actually officially represent yet, but we're involved in their development at a youth international level. So we help them with their game film, with their individual development plans. We watch and connect with them each week, and then we're also in discussions with how to create a pathway for young aspiring players that might be at universities in Canada as well. So yeah, we get involved in a lot of things when we provide a service, and it's exciting actually to get involved in the data analysis side, because the clubs that they work for and they play for will send us all their physical data, technical data, and then we can discuss with them, the coaches, about how's their tactical play, what do they need to work on. We'll sit and discuss with a career pathway for them. Where do you want to be, in 2 years from now? What type of player do you want to be? What type of person do you want to be? What kind of lifestyle do you want to have? And then we'll kind of construct a pathway for them. Contract negotiation was a very new one for me when I first started, because it was just me with the agency. It was only myself. So learning more about the business side and helping with negotiation that might inspire young players, again, that 18 to 24 year old bracket, about, right, I would love to have a goal bonus in there for this player. I would love to have an appearance fee in there for the player, so that there's enticement for the players that we represent to hit good landmarks, that they will get remunerated well, and also for the agency as well. They'll get there's money coming back into us if we help them with their development. Sports leadership, as mentioned, we've got a sports psychologist that any of the players that we represent globally can book in with once every 2 weeks to have a meeting. None of the staff in the agency actually get involved in that. So it's, time for the player to maybe speak to somebody that doesn't, know intimately the game of soccer or football well. That helps them. And then game analysis. So we have individuals that work for us from a service provider that get involved in video analysis. They use certain software as well to go through the type of things that maybe the coaches want them to keep working on. So it gives you an idea of the type of services that most agencies will provide players. I know some agencies as well that will go into even greater detail. They will work with nutritional plans. They'll give them financial advice. That's somewhere where we want to be in the next 5 years. Our growth is happening so quickly for us that it's better for us to stick to 5 or 6 principles that we feel we can work well as we grow. There'll be parts as well to our business that we'll hopefully get involved in at some point. And hopefully on the left-hand side, you'll get to know some of the names at some point. With the growth of the game here in Canada, I'm hoping that we're able to influence the game as well in a bigger scale with some staff, head coaches. So approaching agencies, I'm not sure how many of you ever have to deal with people that reach out to families or children, or how it works, but it's certainly not something I have ever done, since I know quite a lot of players in the market here in Calgary. I don't think I've ever reached out to anybody, but if they do, and you have a player that is forging ahead, is top player consistently in local games here in Calgary at the highest level and provincial level, and then maybe is playing at some of the big centres across the country, then you have to make sure that they are licensed. So they should not be operating until they have that license. And then most definitely look to this card here. So once you pass your license, you're given a business card by FIFA. This is my own business card right now, and it can show you here the date that I was certified to be able to represent minors. So ensure that they have a valid FIFA license card. Do they have a developmental approach? That would be something as well that I would look for. I think that you'll hear a lot of that type of quote from me in the next, half an hour or so. Is there a developmental approach? Is there an education there that the agency will help you with? Are they going to get involved with how to make the player better tomorrow than they are today? And what are they doing to achieve that? So have they got a history of understanding what development is? And if they don't, do they have people around them that do as well? So they'd be the two big ones. Ensure that, first of all, you're speaking to somebody that has the credentials to be able to operate as an agent. Second one would be, what is their appetite for a developmental approach to football? And then the last one nobody should be asking you, can you give us $500 and I'll represent you, I'll make you a video, I'll take you to Spain, to Germany. That is all illegal. You cannot do that anymore. So when we create videos, highlights packages for players, if we have them in a session with our sports psychologist, that is all covered by us. That is part of our service. So we never take any money up front at all. So make sure that there's nothing in there. If you are being asked to go on trial and have to pay, the only things that you should be paying for are your travel, accommodation, and your expenses. You should not be paying extra fees that aren't explained. I had a player in July, actually, from Canada. He was South African, played for Vancouver Whitecaps. He was the captain of the U17s, also played twice professionally, made his debut. He went to Scotland and the team covered every single aspect: the hotel, meals, travel, everything. They really went above and beyond. So that was a player coming from Canada, didn't pay a single cent once he landed in Scotland. So that is the expectation that we all have upon each other as agents.
Chris, can I ask you a question just on that as well? Just for a
Yes.
quick sec. You hear sometimes of stories that it goes, oh, pay me $2,000 up front, and when you sign your contract, we'll take that $2,000 out of that payment then. Is that something that's allowed, illegal? Is it something that is quite frowned upon? What would you have to say about that?
Yeah, my interpretation of why FIFA went down this model of making sure everybody had certification was that exact thing was happening, and families and players were getting exploited. So they changed and felt, well, if there's this wealth of expertise as agents and you get high agent fees, if there's transfers, you can see that 10% might not be a lot, but if there's a transfer fee of 500,000, that's one payment of $50,000. I'm not saying that's where we are at as an agency at all, but you can see that when there is large monies going around, that the expectation by FIFA and the confederations is that agencies should be providing services first. So you should not be taking any money that is illegal. If there was to be a report to FIFA, I think that an agent can be suspended from anywhere between 6 months to 2 years. You could have your license taken away, and you can also be fined up to 180,000 Swiss francs for that type of unprofessional kind of solicitation to a player. So completely illegal, and you could get into a lot of trouble if that was something that you were doing.
So essentially, rule of thumb, if money is asked for upfront, stop the conversation, go somewhere else.
Yeah, there'll be lots of lots of competitive agencies out there that will not do that, and they will be righteous, and they will be very professional and ethical, and they will not be asking for money up front. There's players that we've represented since 2023. We've not made any money on. We've only ever given money out, really, in terms of time spent, the services we provide, and we wouldn't expect anything until the player has maybe developed longer. We have to spend longer with them in their video analysis, say, or their physical development needs to get better. We understand that as an agency that we have to invest in that time for us to be able to get that investment back at some point. So to answer your question, yes, if you are approached by agencies and they're asking for money up front, you would have to ask the question, what is that money for? If it's for flights, accommodation and meals to go on trial or to go and sign with a club, then I can understand that. But if it's for services that they should be providing you, then I would walk away from that.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, we'll carry on the pitfalls. Okay, so this is just some of the hearsay that I hear from fellow agencies that we work with. We sometimes collaborate with various agencies on a global scale. If I could think off the top of my head, we have an agency in Cameroon, South Africa, Finland, Scotland, Hungary, I think is the other one, and France that we work with. And we hear a lot of stories from them, and we discuss about them, what is happening, why are the people that are struggling to get the license, what is it like being out there as an agent in that type of world. So these are the pitfalls that you've got to kind of watch and just be very curious about and ask a lot of questions. It might, from my perspective, I would ask questions about it, but it might not be something that you know too much about. But I would always just encourage you to ask as many questions as you can if you're unsure about what is right and what is wrong. And local versus afar. So there's a difficulty moving continents. If you have the right to live in different countries, maybe passport, maybe through family heritage, then that is understandable that you can move. However, there are rules on minor soccer players, even if you do have the right to live somewhere. For example, if I was to move to Scotland, I have the right to be there because I have a UK passport. But if I had a child that was 16 years old and I moved them from one club to the next club, say in Scotland, I would have to show so many layers of the reasons why I'd be moving there that wouldn't just be based on soccer related. So I'll go through that anyway. I often hear as well, and I think that it's changing every single year in Canada, that the Canadian pathway is getting better. Whilst I am so impressed with the pathways that are available for players, there's still a shortage of clubs for players to go around. And there's also, maybe a lack at this very moment of true professional experience when it comes to player identification. So I could see why some people would look to go to other parts of the world because there's a player identification model that's a longer and more established process. I would think that do your research. I hear sometimes as well with players that I work with in the city, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm going on to a tournament in Spain, and we're playing Real Madrid." We're playing Atletico Madrid, but the player I know is a player that's not playing at the highest level in Calgary and maybe has some deficiencies as a soccer player. It would be surprising to me that they will be playing Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. So do your research, and that was just an example, but do your research. Make sure that that what is being offered to you is actually taking place. That would lead me to the next part about being confused. If if I had a child that was 16 years old that was into hockey, I wouldn't really know where to begin, and I would probably feel a lot of confusion a lot of the time when it came to what's the right thing to do, for my child, and you would get a sense of not feeling like you want to miss out. So ask questions, don't get confused. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, because football will find you. And I think Jordan will maybe talk about that at some point, but that is always a saying that I feel that I do believe in. I think some players might get missed in certain areas because the player identification model isn't as experienced as it should be in this country. But at some point, I hope that they will get found. So they might get missed when they're 15, 16, but at some point, maybe 18, 19, they will get found. And there's lots of evidence out there of players who did get missed in those 15, 16, 17, 18 years, but by the time they're 21, they're playing for their national team, and they never played for a youth national team in their life. I also know of a player I actually played with in Scotland who was youth national team captain in 15, 16, and 17, and he was an amateur soccer player by the time he was 23, 24. So, make sure that you know that if you keep working hard as a player, or your child is really invested and wants to get better, that anything is possible. Who benefits? So lots of ID camps, and you're feeling that you need to get signed up to a team, a Premier League team is coming to Calgary and running a camp, and it's an ID event. It's probably really good for them to have extra training, and that's maybe a reason why you will sign up and say, right, it's the middle of the summer, they're off school, it'd be good for them to go to a camp. Totally understand, but just be aware that if you're a Canadian with no right to live in the EU and you're going to a Real Madrid camp or an Arsenal camp and your child's 9, you're not going there to be identified to move to London or Madrid. That just can't happen for you at that time. it could happen in a few years from now. You're going there for a football education. You're maybe going there for the chance to learn new things and get different cultural experiences when it comes to soccer. Sometimes as well, in my experience, I was fortunate to be able to take a team from Calgary once only. I think I've been to Scotland. It was in 2016. And because I knew all of the coaches at the time in the main clubs in Scotland, we paid for our flights, paid for our accommodation and our meals, and that was it. We didn't have to pay for any extra training that we were getting from any of the coaches. When we played games, it was all free. Yeah, we got certain tickets to games as well. We didn't have to pay for them. So that was an experience where I felt that, you know, because of the network that I was fortunate to have at that point, then the players here benefited from going and getting a cultural experience. That was really what it was all about. There were so many of them, and they were tier one. There was no AYSL or APTL at the time. It was just tier one, and they wanted to feel, could I make it as a soccer player professionally? So we took them to Scotland, and they quickly realized that they had to work really hard if that was going to be an eventuality for them. So if you're finding that you're going overseas and it's $4,000, $5,000 a time, and it's a massive club, there's probably a bigger distance from the actual truth of being what that big club is. That might not be the case, but from my experience, it's very difficult for you to go to Arsenal and actually be playing, you know, the best 15-year-olds that they have. You might be playing a community team from there. You might be playing their B team. You might have to pay for tickets, that type of thing. So just be careful of that. There are people out here, though, in Calgary that are very well connected, and they either run clubs or they work in clubs. And I'm sure that they can pick up the phone and phone people in Europe and be able to set up a similar type of experience as to what I was able to do in 2016. So there are people out there with fantastic relationships and pathways for you. So just make sure you know who those are. And watch for your the scams, I guess, would be the ones that you're having to pay a lot of money up front, or there's a variation of a level of player that's coming with you, and it's maybe not a club, it's maybe a showcase where you're going with various players that you don't really know, and it's you know, maybe at that point you're filling pockets of some other people. That is generally my experience as well when it comes to that. The next part would be about the educational piece. So for some of you that understand that there's a really good way to go for in terms of being a collegiate athlete, there's also ID events and showcases that you can do. When you are going overseas, do you have the right to live there? That would be the first one that you have to make sure. Are you a Canadian, just with a Canadian passport? Are you trying to go to Spain or Germany? There will be lots of hoops that the club in Germany and Spain will have to go through. You have to be a top player for them to be willing to go through those hoops. The player I was referencing earlier from South Africa that actually lives in Vancouver, the club in Scotland are willing to go through, you know, 15,000 probably British pounds to go to the home office in the UK to get him a visa because they like him that much. Are your clubs out there that you have spoken to or want you to move, are they willing to do that if you don't have the right to live there? The venue country's developmental pathway, that's another one. So if you are going to Spain or Germany, have you looked at the league of the club that the showcase is? Do they have what's their average age of their first team? Is it 27 years old? Is that a good place for you to go with your 18-year-old? That is something that you really need to understand, and that's where probably the experience of an agent comes in, because we will look at players and the different type of player they are, what type of systems do they play, what will culturally, football and background do they have, and where can I fit them into. There is no point in me taking a first more of an athletic player that's not technically great to take him to Spain. I might take him to a place like Scotland where it's more of an athletic game, and I can get something out of him. And also on the female side as well, the Swedish league was very high technical league, and the player that I represent from the US, she's a very technical player, extremely well renowned within the NCAA Division 1 when she was playing there. When she went to Sweden, she was fantastic, but she was also wanted in Portugal, where it was more of an athletic league, and we didn't take her there. So know your leagues, try and get an understanding of the clubs as well. Or if you don't know anything about the game, that's where you do really probably need to get some advice from a lawyer. Assessment of your child's ability within the local league. So, as harsh as it might be, I would probably assess, is my girl or my boy, are they top players in their team? Are they standing out? Is this too easy for them? Is this definitely a truth that they could go and be a professional soccer player? At 12 years old, they could be the standout. What do they need by the time that they're 18 years old? We don't know that. Nobody really involved in player identification has that crystal ball. And then understanding university pathway. There's a fantastic one now as well with the Canadian Premier League, where if you are forging ahead and you're a standout player, there's probably a high chance that you could get selected in the CPL draft. Each team, there's 8 teams, they have the ability to take 2 players every single year in the draft. So there's 16 spots available within the Canadian Premier League. So could you be the top 16 players in a Canadian Premier League season, in a U Sports season, and then you could find yourself through the university pathway, whilst also, investing in education as well. And the clubs, what history do they have of playing Canadians? How hard is it to break into a CPL team if you're a Canadian player? What positions do they like to use young players? Is the local team here in Calgary do a fantastic job of bringing through attacking players that have gone on to some fantastic leagues across Europe? So that would be something that if you're a winger and you're a forward, you could look at and see what history have they got of playing Canadians. How old do they like to play Canadians? And then, the far one is evaluate the cost. As mentioned to you, you should really only be playing for your flight. In some cases, you might only need to pay your flight. In most cases, when you do go to ID events or you're getting showcased or a club really wants to see you, they will have an agreement with you that you'll pay your flight there. If they want to sign you, they'll cover that flight that you paid, but they'll also pay for your flight home as well. And they'll cover your accommodation, your travel, and your expenses and everything like that.
Chris, if I could just hit pause for a moment. Yeah. There was a question in the chat. You had said something about the player identification model and how that's developing and emerging, and how there might be pockets that maybe players are missed and aren't identified. If you could maybe expand on that kind of, what do you mean by that player identification model, and maybe what does that look and feel like?
Well, it had been a personal opinion of mine. And again, it's just my perspective. And we all have probably different perspectives, each of us that have worked in clubs here or still do work in clubs across the country, that there is a question mark to be raised about what type of player do we want to develop in Canada. And that has never been a unified set of principles that we understood when we first were coaching together. Jordan, I bet you the player that we liked the look of a lot in Canada was fast, was able to cover ground. Their average speed per hour was 27 kilometers. Their fastest speed had to be over 30 kilometers an hour. I think that now there is a transition where not only the men's side but the female side of the game in Canada from a national team point of view is starting to see the effects of other countries developing better footballers. And you even heard Jesse Marsh after the games there in the summer, where he talked about how players were getting missed. I think he was in referencing the centre midfielder that had played for Watford that was now playing at Marseille. He was talking about how he was missed. And he had been 19, 20 years old and or 18 years old and had never been picked up in a youth national team before. But here he was, playing against some of the best teams in South America and being the best player on the field. And this was a player that hadn't played any games to an extent at a youth international level. So there is a feeling out there that there's some players that are getting missed. that might be more from the past. And when I mean the past, I'm talking, 2-3 years ago, there was a consensus. I had represented a player and I'd coached this player who had moved from Calgary to Vancouver Whitecaps on the basis that the first team had a really powerful player in the same position as him. And he left Calgary at 16 years old. The head coach of that team left, and the new coach came in and said, no, I want more technical players that play centre mid. Therefore, that player we don't need anymore. And all the players that were more technical players than him when he was playing in Calgary were now too old for the club. So there was an example there of where, a player that might be a very technical player was struggling to get seen because what was the requirement from that professional club was we wanted a more physical profile for that position because we can develop him to be like the first team player that's playing currently. I then think as well when I watched, and again, this is just perspective, when I watched the national team, the U17 women play the US a couple of months ago, there was a player from Calgary who was probably the most technical player that we had in that team. And the difference between, even some of the Central American teams and also the Canadian team, there was a gulf between the relationship they had with the ball. And it kind of hindered to my feeling that, are we really evaluating the type of player that we need to have? Are we looking at a player that's 14 years old and saying we have some absolute fundamental qualities as a footballer that we can develop over 5 years and this player can be a really good top professional soccer player? Or are we looking at what the successful players are now and hoping that they're better when they're 21? So hopefully that helps answer that question. That's just a perspective, and I'm seeing that more and more now that I'm in the agent side, is that we haven't prioritized the technical players enough. And is that due to, the demands of the clubs having to win? Because if you win and you can showcase that you're the best team, then you will likely get more players coming to your club. I'm not sure. That, again, that's just a perspective that I have.
Yeah, and I think maybe just to layer into that, as you kind of alluded to, different clubs have got different profiles of the players. So what they're IDing and valuing in a player is going to be potentially vastly different from the club that might be one province over, next country, etc. So I mean, the game is full of opinions. The game is full of styles and methods and ways to get 3 points. So it is a game that's potentially for everyone and has a bit of a place for everyone. It's just about identifying those opportunities, and sometimes, as bad as it sounds, it is about right spot at the right time, and sometimes there is some luck involved with it.
Yeah, you're spot on there, Jordan, because you're talking about the geographical differences and the cultural differences when it comes to actually what does the game look like, feel like, and smell like to people that play the game and are involved in player recruitment. For example, I get often sent to me from clubs as far as Asia. I work with clubs in Australia, but it's amazing for me to learn in this year, such a quick learning curve for me as an agent to learn where do the principles of development that I agree with, where am I most aligned, that I can make the biggest difference to players. For example, when I was in Sweden a month ago, I went to the Sweden Female Cup final between the club BK Häcken, which was the club of the player that I represent, that I got signed in Sweden, and was speaking with the owner, and the sporting director is in charge with player recruitment. And I said, right, I have a centre back that's coming through, is going to be graduating NCAA 2025. What do you look for in the centre back? Passing distances 10 meters. It has to be very good at passing the ball 10 meters. Okay, she's really good at passing the ball. What's the next principle and that you're looking for in a player? Okay, over 30, 40 meters, have to disguise the pass. So he's wanting the girl to be able to look left, but able to hit a 30-yard pass or a 20-yard pass along the ground to split a line. Okay, great. The player can maybe do that. She might need some work. What's the next thing you're looking for in a centre back? Well, it needs to play a good diagonal, and it needs to travel at this speed by the time it gets to the winger. We have to be able to move the ball from the left-hand side of the field to the right-hand side of the field in this time. So she has to be able to hit that pass at a pretty consistent basis. And not once did, in that whole conversation as it continued, did he ever mention to me height, speed, physical size, weight, anything like that, or a playing history. Whereas I might go and ask a club of another confederation completely, and the first three things they will cite will have to be 184 centimeters or taller and have to be able to run 30 kilometers an hour. So the differences in understanding where the strengths and the superpowers of a player might exist, and where can we bring them so that they can shine the most. So hopefully that helps give you some reasoning behind where we kind of go with our thinking.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And if it doesn't, I'm sure there'll be some more questions in the chat. There's a couple more. I'll let you keep moving along, and I'm sure these questions will come into your presentation as well.
Okay. This is what my advice, and again, it's just my perspective. Lots of different agents, lots of different people involved in the game will have various perspectives of the game, and I think that sticking to your beliefs and your perspectives is something that as agents we have to do. We have to have our beliefs and we stick to them. But here is mine for young players that are playing the game in Calgary, specific to those of you that are on the call. So setting out, the first thing you need to do, and in this actual slide, is the steps of development. This is where you need to prioritize and invest your time. I don't think that you need to go and invest your time traveling all the way across the world until you're minimum 16, 17 years old. So if you're on this call and you know somebody, and you're on this call because you're related to somebody that's 10, 12, 13 years old, put the passport back in the drawer, because you don't need to go and do that. What you need to do, in my opinion, is in setting out, you need to install a love for the game, and also a curiosity about being better every single day. And that's what the best players in the world all have at any level. They're always curious about how do they get better. And involving myself in this side of the game, I've been able to meet some amazing individuals. I went to Africa and met some clubs and players out there, and the intensity they have for being better and growth and development and acquiring new skills is monumental. And you have a bit of a competition across the world in being competitive with different cultures about being better at soccer every single day. So first thing would be setting out and having a love for the game and love for getting better in as poor layman terms as I can put it there. But next one would be the want and the desire to acquire skills, or in my description is always to add tools to the toolbox. You have a player that has a toolbox, and when they're 3 years old, you can put a sandpaper in there because they can stand up and not fall over for 10 seconds. Then you've got a bit of sandpaper in your toolbox. And in time, you want to acquire new skills and make that toolbox as big as it can. So, when you're at your game and you come home and you won 5-0 and you've been unbeaten in 2 seasons and your kid's 8 years old, you're in a bad spot because they're not acquiring skills. That is not what we probably in the world of football would describe what is winning. What is winning is probably the acquiring of skills and tools and adding them to the toolbox. Then the next one would be refining those tools. Are you using them in the game? Are you challenging your player or your child to say, right, you team bunted the ball down the field and you're the fastest player in the team and you scored 6 goals last game, but are you able to do a scissor? Can you do a rollover? Can you do a rabona? Can you juggle the ball 5 times? Can you kick it as high as you can and control it? Can you do all of these things? That is what is important at any age that you will be involved in youth soccer up until 18 years old, is still the refining of skills. A dedication, are you out on the field practicing with your child? Are you watching the game? Because the beauty about how the game is developing in our country is a lot of the games are getting videoed. So is there a dedication to improving? Are they out on the field themselves? Is that self-driven dedication, or is it dedication from somewhere else. Encourage that, that self-dedication. Ensure long-term education. That's a subject that a lot of people probably will have different perspectives on, but that's what you need to prioritize your finances and your investments on, is ensuring that there's a long-term education. Are you surrounded by people at your club that understand age group appropriate curriculums? Because it, just like being at school, you will not teach a 5-year-old Pythagoras theorem instead of teaching, the basics of one apple plus another apple equals 2 apples. So making sure that the players are learning the right stage of their development is their first priority. Is not the results on the field. It's the results through their curriculum and their education that they're looking at. So ensuring that's the case would be something I would invest a lot of time on. That might mean that you're not always at the best team, or you could be at the best team at the best club. And as long as they have the right education long term, then you're in a really good place, and you're surrounded by people that understand that. Then, and there's lots of those clubs and individuals in the city, so you have many options available for you for that. And then the other one would be play. I think that from my experience in helping players leave Calgary and go to other parts of the world, the biggest criticism that I always hear of players is their tactical IQ or understanding for the game. That doesn't mean to say that they should play 6 games a week and be burnt out. It just means to say that they've got to have a love for playing and understanding the game itself. So making sure that your child is playing. So they're 10 years old, do they get equal play time? Or maybe your kid is the best player on the team and some other kids are not getting played. What will happen to you if other players come, or your child is not developing as quick? Will he get less, or will she get less game time that way as well? So play. That would be my layman terms summary of what I feel is the most important thing to prioritize at a youth level when playing the game in Calgary. Because if you do all of these things semi-well, football will find you. And an example of that, I think a professional team from England were over and they ran a camp this summer. And I got a call from somebody connected to that club. And they said, wow, there's a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, I can't remember the age exactly. A player is phenomenal. You've got to keep an eye on this player. We love the look of this player. I want you to keep tracks. Maybe you should start helping with the family with what's important. And this player's 9, 10 years old. So is not playing in a very well-known club, I don't think, in the city, but is obviously in a great environment for them. So football will find you. That was me getting a call about a player I had never seen before, don't even know the name at this time either. So football will find you at some point.
Chris, kind of on that, there was a question in the chat. Just at what age, do you consider evaluating players for maybe higher potential or more professional levels of the game? Like, at what age do you think that starts to become a reality, at least in this country, and then maybe globally for right or for wrong?
Well, the rules that I'll get to in the next few slides, you cannot move until you're 16 years old for reasons associated to football. So you cannot leave one confederation or one association, go to the next. So you couldn't even leave the US and go to you couldn't even leave Canada and go to the US if you were 14 years old and it was a purely football reason. You would have to go to the US and show the association of the US that you're there for academic reasons, or your parents are moving there because of work-related reasons. So you can't even move until you're 16. So, if maybe at the age of 15 years old, if you're a phenomenal player, there has been somebody that's had a conversation with you at some point about, look, it might be worth your while going exploring being a professional soccer player at some point in your journey. 15 would probably be a good age to go and do that, because whilst you can travel and be exposed to that and getting assessed, it would be a short enough time that you could move by the time you're say 16 years old. So definitely not any earlier than that age. And even at 15, I think that is still quite young, because a club would need to really invest in your development at a 15-year-old age um, to really be able to get the benefit of that when they're 18, 19, because there's no guarantee that the player at 15 will be, on an upward trajectory by the time they're 18, 19 anyway. So yeah, 15 would be the earliest. And even then, I've had a few people come out and reach to me that I know that are 15 years old, and I'll have said, there's a good enough pathway here that I think that you will get assessed and you will be seen if you just keep doing the things that you're doing. You don't need to go and get external assessment anywhere else. It should find you. So yeah, probably something along those lines.
And I think, Chris, part of what you're saying as well, like if I'm interpreting things correctly, is this is not I need to play APDL right now. I need to be in tier 1. I need to be in an MLS academy. I need to be in a pro club academy, etc. I mean, there is no linear pathway. I mean, what you've outlined on the screen right now are general principles that anyone, whether they're in tier 87 or they're the top player in Calgary, can be doing on a regular basis to make sure that they are continuing to develop and see where the game does take them. Local players like Gareth Smith Doyle that were tier 3 player not long ago have signed into the Cavalry Club, right? Mm-hmm. So there is no A to B to C to D kind of pathway, and these I think are great principles to outline that it can happen for anyone, but it might just take longer for some, or it might take more work for some.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's players that I've known, probably the most gifted player that I've known on a female side here in Calgary, probably never played even tier 1 until in her own gender until she'd have been 15 maybe. So, and there's an example of a player leaving one of the clubs and going to Vancouver, who also was playing in a different gender, and when she was playing on the girls' side, she was playing down tiers. So there is no, you definitely need to be at this APDL or tier 1. Absolutely not the case. You might be at a club that doesn't have the capability of fielding a team in any of those leagues, and you're absolutely where you are is more than good enough for now. So no, absolutely not. I think that the most important thing is ensuring that the people that you go and play with and the club that you're at have an understanding of what long-term education is and are invested in your development long-term as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's about long-term. It's about are you better than you were yesterday?
Yeah, if you can do that every day, if you're better, even if you just do it week to week, if you're better next week than you were this week, you do that over the course of 8 years of being a youth player, you will be somewhere by the end of that. Maybe it's into, you're playing lifelong soccer at a level that you'll be happy with. It's not professional. Or you maybe have got lucky and you're going to university on a scholarship. Or, with now these new pathways that are coming in because of professional men and women, you're now in one of those academies, and you've been highlighted as a player that is of interest to them. So
yeah. And speaking with some coaches here today, I mean, it amazes some of them how players don't show up 15 minutes early and do a little bit of extra before the session starts, how they don't stay behind 15, 20, half an hour afterwards and do a little bit of extra. It amazes them at how few players actually do that. So if there is a gap that needs to be made up, like what little steps, are the players taking to continue to progress down the path that they say that they want, but are their actions meeting that as well?
I think that you speak a good point there, because a lot of the top players in the world that are out there forging a career as a professional somewhere, male and female, all have one thing in common, that they are curious about being better. And any opportunity they get to be able to train and work on their game, they're taking it. And the players that, certainly that we represent in our agency, they are often asking us, what's next? What do I need to learn? What can you get me in touch with this person because they help me be faster? Or this person here, this sports psychologist is really good at helping people be calm in front of goal. I need to speak to them. So, you know, there is a curiosity with those players playing at the elite level, and I think that you can see it sometimes in a player that, you know, is a young player now that might be always at the park, working on their game, watching a game on TV. You know, they're dedicated to their being better, and they all have that in common.
An obsession to be better, a
Yeah.
curiosity and an obsession, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of
Chris,
course.
sorry, I don't want to interrupt you anymore. Please.
Okay. So moving, this next slide is all the rules, and I took them from the FFAR, which is the agent regulations of FIFA. So you can actually find them online. It's I can't even describe to you the size of the binder that I had to go through, but the data here is going to be from that document. So it's word to word, basically, and I won't try and read all of it for you. But on the left-hand side, this is pertaining to individuals that are looking to transfer maybe from Calgary and you want to go and play professionally and you really want to go and play for Real Madrid. How's that going to happen for you? So these are the rules here from kind of A through to E of the 5 exceptions to the rule that players can only transfer internationally once they're 18 years old or older. So the only exceptions to those rules, so basically what FIFA are saying is you cannot move for soccer internationally until you're over the age of 18 unless your parents move to that country in which the new club is located for reasons not linked to football. So they get a job somewhere else and you move with them. So you can be younger than 18. The player is aged between 16 and 18 and the transfer takes place within the territory of the European Union or the European Economic Area. So that's a host of countries in Europe and a selection of other countries that are not part of the EU but are part of a different group band of countries. If you are between 16 and 18 and that move is taking place between both of those areas, you can do it. You can also do it if you travel from a national border 50 kilometers and the club on the other side of the border is 50 kilometers. So hypothetically, if you lived in the border post of Canada and there was a professional club on the other side of that border no further than 50 kilometers, you could move then for football if you were younger than 18 years old. The player is at least temporarily permitted to reside in the country of arrival. Maybe is in a vulnerable state, requires protection. And the player is a student that moves without his parents to another country temporarily for academic reasons in order to undertake an exchange program. That club cannot be a professional club. So you can leave Canada and go and play as long as they're fully amateur. So as you can see here, moving before you're 18 is extremely tough to go and play and register at a professional club in another part of the world. On the right-hand side, this is related to players younger, around the age of 10. And a lot of things need to go according to plan here. You need to show that there is good care being taken, that there's education of a substantial standard taking place for your child to be able to move from Canada to, let's say, France. Obviously, parents need to come with them at that point, but that is extremely difficult if you're moving from, one professional environment to another professional environment. Maybe in some cases in the world, you might not know, but the earliest 3-4 years old, they're into a professional club playing in their academy. That doesn't really exist here in Canada, but just to give you a highlight of the difficulty moving internationally for football when you're younger than 18 years old. After 18 years old, the difficulty is just about the requirement legally for you to have the right to live and work there. So in summary, difficult to move across confederations. Confederations are the CONCACAF is the North American collection of associations, so that takes control of all Central America and North America. That is a confederation, and the European UEFA is a confederation as well. So moving between CONCACAF to UEFA, very difficult. Ease will be to show credentials. So do you have the right to live there and work there? Do you have a visa or a passport? You need professional experience or exposure. So if you're looking to move at some point, my best advice would be, if you're a female and a male player here, is try and get minutes in the CPL. And the benefit to you as a young player is that the clubs in the CPL have to have 2,100 minutes every season of players aged 21 or younger registered at a game. So that roughly works out to be around 18 minutes every game. They need to have somebody 21 or younger playing in their team. So there is an opportunity there for you to earn, good exposure and professional experience, and then make the move to Europe, as a number of players, in local terms has happened. Victor Laturi has moved to Scotland and is playing for Ross County. Arabin Pepo is also playing. He was playing in Scotland on loan, but it was at Luton Town. And there's a number of other players as well that have gone on to leave the CPL and go and play in Gote, in Tigna as well. He also played a lot of good minutes here in the CPL and is now playing very good level in France. So that would be a really good avenue for you to do that if you don't have the right to live and work in the EU, or you want to go to Andorra. That's the only place where, well, one of the few places in Europe that you'd be able to go to without any right to be there, because they have much lenient rules about immigration coming into the country. Be willing to go on trial at some point. This is for players that are at the level of being able to do that, because in other parts of the world, if you are looking to travel and train and go and be a professional somewhere else, if you've not been a pro, there's no record of you being a footballer, so they'll need to have a look at you. And as you've heard me say before, football will find you at some point. Summary for youths: moving due to parents' work family is an open process, but it's a long process as well. I don't think many people will probably go down this road. And going to clubs for travel abroad at young ages is dependent on preferences, but not advised. So if you have, the opportunity financially to be able to support that type of venture, that's great. But for those of you that, $4,000, $5,000, is a bit of money that you would rather spend somewhere else, I've given you good steps that you could invest some of that time and money into at other times. This slide here is also from the FIFA reports of 2023. This was the Professional Football Report, which is an amazing article and document. I think it's over 600 pages long, but it goes into every single country in the world, how many professional athletes they have, how many leagues that they operate in their country. And to give you an idea, there's 189 professional players with a written contract playing in Canada, and there's a total of 8 teams. Of these 189, 60% of them are domestic and 30% of them are foreign. So there you go. If you are investing your time in researching where you would like to play and where you think that you would like to go at some point as a player, take a look at this report. You can also find such great detail in here that will be able to tell you that you've got to take about 120, 130 players are available positions every year in Canada for you to be able to play in Canada. There's only 8 clubs. So that's this number on the right hand side here is to give you an idea, but that was just taken from the general population. It's very difficult for you to become a professional football player here in Canada because there's only 8 clubs and 189 contracts are available right now. If I compare that to Costa Rica, we probably think maybe a lesser footballing country, and there's 818 professional players with a contract and 30 clubs, and 90% of them are local. So maybe you're sitting on this call and you have a Costa Rican passport, then you might have a higher chance of being able to be a professional because of the sheer number of professional contracts that are available to you as a professional footballer. So you start to get an understanding of where you've got to look at. What are the opportunities that exist for a player? And if I go back to the Canada one, this isn't to really knock the opportunities in Canada. It's actually to highlight and say that if you are a professional soccer player in Canada, you're doing rather well. And also to give you the example that 8 clubs every year, this is just the men, because in 2025 there's a full women's league as well. 8 teams in the league will be able to take on 2 players. Each team can take on 2 players from a U Sports team in the country. So there are 16 openings every single year available to you as a young player. So how great is that for anybody that might be connected to a young player in U Sports soccer right now? And then the last one would be, because obviously in my heritage being Scottish, is to show you that there's almost 4,800 professional contracts in Scotland, and 64% of them are domestic. So you can still see that there is a big and a heavy influence on foreign players. You can see the difference here in Costa Rica, only 10%, and in Canada, there's 30%. So, there is opportunities out there for you. You just need to know where you're trying to go, what demographic should you go based on the amount of opportunities exist. Also, would my player fit in these type of countries as well?
Chris, if I could try and tie 2 questions together here. The one question is how do they determine how many of those contracts are available per country? Do you have any idea there?
Yeah, that'll just be on a rough estimate. So let's try and take this Canadian example. Let's say that there's 8 teams, and each of these teams have 18 professional footballers on their contracts. They might have 2 or 3 other development, which are kind of semi-professional contracts, but just let's assume that there's 18 per 8 teams. And then there's some players that are maybe their contracts ran out when this report came through. This would be sort of rough estimate every year that there's 189 contracts required for the teams that are playing in the CPL. That's not a very accurate number, because at the time of this report, maybe there's a player that's contracts run out and he is a professional or she is a professional. She's just not at a club yet, but she was at a club or he was at a club. So they will probably do some sort of diagnostics on the average team, how many professional players exist in each of these teams on an average basis.
Understood. And I hope that answers the question. If it doesn't, just ask a follow-up one. And trying to tie that together, I mean, you've got the domestic and the foreign contracts broken down, or sorry, FIFA has, and you've provided that information here tonight. As an agent, I mean, part of your role obviously is to really narrow down maybe what league, what market, a player that you're working with might fit. But then also probably within the club, like you gave that example of the Swedish club, that we're looking for this out of our center back, and we're not really so concerned about this. Is that something that's typically provided by agents in terms of that level of insight and knowledge, and maybe how do you go about doing that, Chris?
Yeah, so we would. Well, I think that, speak on behalf of anybody that's an agent, we would have to do that, because otherwise we're going down an avenue that we'll never get results with if we don't know any of that information. So there is a lot of databases out there where we can gather and capture as much statistical information about the leagues, and also in particular about the club in question. So when I was looking at this club in Sweden, BK Häcken, they had an average age of, I think it was 22 years old, and the player that I represented was 20. So I immediately knew that this club within the league had the lowest average age. I also then knew that the player profile they had, based on a database that I could use, that their forwards, they like technical players. Then when I picked up the phone and said, okay, what kind of, this was actually the first time I'd spoken to this club. I wanted to know what kind of style they play. What do they look for in their wingers? Do they like inverted wingers? Do they like wingers that stay wide and take people on 1v1? What do they look for in terms of physical qualities, technical qualities? Then I got to know a little bit more about that team as well. So I would look and think, right, where will my player have the best chance of being able to be a professional? Then I had to look at what happens to the professionals after they sign at this club. So I looked at BK Häcken and I could see that in the last 3 years, they had sold 2 players under the age of 24 to either PSG or Olympique Lyon, and 3 players went to the English Premier League, Women's League, and one of them went to Chelsea, 2 of them went to Arsenal. So I knew that if I could get her into this club, it wasn't just about the now, it was about the future, that I felt that they were going to really invest in her development, because their goal was to get the player sold to a bigger club in Europe. So anyway, to answer your question, yes, we would look at a lot of those diagnostics about what type of league do they have, what is the average age, what did the league requirements have on clubs for playing young players? Is there a stipulation like the CPL where you have to play players under 21? And also what's the average age of that team? Because by comparison, there was another team in the league that their average age was 27. And therefore, I didn't contact that club because it wasn't a relative club for me and with that player. So this, having an understanding as an agent of what the leagues are, what the clubs are, is very important. And, even down the bottom of this slide, you can get an idea of the type of information that I would look at. So international transfers incoming, there's 98 a season in the CPL, and outgoing there's 111. So there's more players leaving to go to international than they are coming in, which is good if you're a young player that's playing in the CPL. You could look at that and think, right, I've got actually more chance of leaving to go to an international market than I do actually have of coming in here. So yeah, I think knowledge is power in this game, and that's why the mega agents out there, they're doing so well, because their knowledge of the game is so high because they've been doing it for so long.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. I hope that answers that question. If not, just ask a follow-up in the chat there.
Okay, and pathways. This is to give you just a quick analysis of the comparisons between the Canadian pathways, the American pathways, and in this case, I've chosen the European pathway because it's a very established men and women center for professional soccer players. So if you're a man or a male player, should I say, and a female player, which will be 2025, there'll be a professional league. There'll be one of each. In the US, if you compare that, there's 3 men and 2 women, but much larger country in terms of its population. Football education. This is an important one because I think that our football education is a developing one, which means that our footballing education is always improving. So that is an exciting thing to be a part of, and something that is only going to benefit the players that are in Canada right now. If I compare that to the US, it's definitely a maturing education. It's a further down the line. You can see that with their youth international teams. You can also see that with the amount of American players that are playing globally in very good leagues. I know that some of the biggest clubs in the world, from a European point of view, they come over to a cup in Florida and watch all of the best youth players in the US, and they're all, recently are taking 14, 15-year-olds from the US into some of the biggest clubs in the world. And in Europe, obviously, the football education is more established because of the length of time that professional football has been around in Europe. And then the minimum salary piece, just to give you an idea of how things are growing and how exciting it is if you're a female player, is that this new league that's starting in 2025 is going to be a very competitive market between Canada and the US. And for the men, there is a bit of a difference between when you're playing in the Canadian Premier League and you might be playing in the MLS. The MLS has an $80,000 minimum salary, and in the US, in the CPL, it's only $33,000. Again, it's a much newer league, so that's only going to improve in time. But gives you an idea of where would you invest some time, and then in Europe it can be anything. I've seen a very low wage in some parts of Europe. In Iceland, for example, Estonia is a little bit lower. In Finland, and even other parts of Eastern Europe, the pay can be sometimes a little bit less, but in other parts of Europe, it can be extremely high. So, yeah, there's lots of comparisons out there, but definitely in Canada, there's very good pathways available. It's developing, which means it's exciting to be a part of because it's always going to be improving. And this, to give you an idea, you'll all be aware of this, most likely, because your clubs will have internal pathways, or in this case, in CMSA, they'll have an idea of what the type of pathways that you can go on as a soccer player. But I just tried to break this down until age is kind of from the bottom of the page to the top of the page. So, you have a love for the sport and you love for the ball when you're very young. And when you're in city leagues, you're seeking football education, and you're playing local leagues, you're not needing to travel far, and you're getting good games. And then as you get a little bit older into your teenager years, you can play PDAP programs available to you, but also the Canadian academy systems that are MLS or Rex, and they're playing in the national development centres. And then as you get to post-secondary, you've got the CPL within Canada, and also Project 8 next year. And then there's the youth sports avenue as well, that will definitely, I'm sure, feed into Project 8, but it's definitely feeding into the CPL currently. So it gives you an idea of the type of pathway that I see when I think of opportunities for players in Canada, which are great. And then that's it. That's it. The question time, Jordan. And I feel like I might have rambled on a fair bit for everybody, so apologies for that.
No, don't apologize for that. I think lots of valuable information in terms of, when you can move, what are some of the things that we need to be looking out for, what are some questions that we need to be asking as well, in terms of just having greater knowledge and really being more savvy around really the business side of the game and the business side of player transfer and contracts as well. Which obviously is an emerging piece to the game here in Canada, and is something that we're excited to support, and hopefully support some of these players on their way as well. When I think about questions, say that there's players or families on this call right now, on the webinar, that are really interested in getting an agent, right? They're saying, oh, I'm a player of good ability. I've got XYZ passport, or I'm curious, or I'd really love to get an agent. Like, Chris, how does that process typically work? Do agents go to players? Do players come to agents? Like, how is that done?
Yeah, I would say that it's a mixture of both. I think that speaking about myself as an agent, I will scout, but I wouldn't be scouting local leagues or anything like that. When I travel, for example, I target AFCON Confederation U20, maybe the youth internationals, U17 international tournaments that exist across the world. That's where I would probably do a lot of the scouting that I do. However, that's not to say that at some point when the agency grows that I won't be looking at maybe the regional academies within Canada once maybe their player identification model is more refined. But also, if somebody was to pick up the phone to me and say, well, there's this really good player locally in Calgary, you should have a look, I would then go and watch probably that player play. I've been to one game because a player was inquiring about potentially having an agent, and I knew of this player being quite a high level player within the province. So I have been to one game actually. So in terms of how would you approach an agent, or agents approach you, it would be probably quite rare for you to be playing a local game in Calgary and you're 14 years old and for an agent to approach. the family at that point. I think that'd be quite rare. I think it was probably highly probable that by the time you're 16, 17, that if you're an aspiring player, maybe a club would reach out to me, or a family would reach out to me and ask me a question about that. But I think that in terms of me being reached by anybody involved in youth soccer in Calgary, I don't think anybody has reached out to me yet. But I get reached out to me probably 10 times a week, either by email or on LinkedIn, where a player globally will ask me, can I be their agent? So it happens a lot where agents get contacted. I just don't know to what extent a youth player's family might contact me, because there is no probably real need for you to have an agent unless you are 16 years old and you have the right to live somewhere else in the world and you're absolutely standing out, and for one reason or another you're not in one of the big centers across the world, across the country at that time, or you're not already recognized in the local next level academy, such as the Calgary under 21s or the PDP group that were playing in the League One this summer.
And Chris, you touched on maybe some of the percentages, the odds, the numbers, of players that will become a professional. We know that it's remote. I've seen numbers out of England that the percentage of players that'll play from League One and up is 0.012% of all players that are in there, and that's just playing a minute. That's not making a career of it. Maybe talk a little bit about maybe university pathways, maybe what that looks like in terms of your experience, both coaching in there, but also as an agent, and maybe how that process can work, or maybe how it does work now.
Yeah, you touched a good point there, because there is a very small percentage of people become professional soccer players, but how many of that small percentage are able to make that their one life career, that they don't need to go and make another living after being a soccer player, is extremely low. I've known players to have played Premier League. I think there was a player I was speaking to 2 weeks ago who'd played 40 times for Crystal Palace. He'd played for his national team, had played a World Cup, played the AFCON, had won the AFCON, which is the biggest competition, is like the UEFA Euro of Africa, had won that as the starting left back, and he was 28 years old and couldn't find a club, and had not found a club for a whole year. So it is very hard, but only when you're trying to become a professional. But to stay being a professional is extremely tough. So, I think a way of making it a reality is always thinking, right, what would I do after I'm playing 10 years of being a pro soccer player? What will I fall back on? And that's where that university pathway, is a really interesting and logical one to go into. If you were a young player that it was a Canadian with a Canadian passport, I'd be looking at U Sports, definitely U Sports now, because of how it can interact with the CPL. And if I play really well in the CPL, there's nothing to say I can't go over to Europe and make a career out of this, because players have done that before. So looking at universities as well, and I speak to some players about what university they want to go to. And my biggest advice to them is to obviously pick the school that works for your academic journey. But let's say you have 4 universities that all provide you with similar quality of your academic career, or academic education is the same between all 4. Pick the school that you've got the quickest chance of playing. Are you going to get put on the field as a first year? Because if you're a first year and you're 18 years old, you go and play and you play really well, you can go into the youth sports draft. And I'm sure this will be the case when the female league comes into play in 2025. You can be a first year that's played lots of minutes youth sports, go into the draft, and then at 19 years old, you're playing professional soccer. And the good thing about that in Canada is that that you've got at least 2 full seasons of being able to play U21 minutes, and your club needs those U21 minutes. So the earlier you can play as a university player, the better it is for you. So that's where, I would always go with my advice when it comes to the university. If you've still got an eye on being a professional, is focus on the academic part is the first priority. But as the second priority, make sure you choose somewhere that will play you, that will understand that you need to play.
I love that, Chris. I think, those first team minutes kind of thing, even if it's at a U Sport level, might not be a professional level, it gets you in that shop window for maybe some more exposure down the line. And there's other pathways as well. There's the collegiate pathway as well through the CCAA league and locally in Alberta, the ACAC. Because again, you're highlighting a very finite number of contracts that are available. Well, it's the same in a university, right? Players are there for 4 or 5 years. They don't cycle out every single year, and a ton of positions and roles and places and rosters open up every year. There's a finite amount of space there. So I think that there's some awareness there. Do you feel like university coaches are actively reaching out to players, or do you feel like times have changed where they're not maybe standing on the sidelines as often, and players are actively sending university coaches their video, their highlights, they're keeping in touch with them? How do you see that process kind of playing out now with maybe some of the players that you're working with and what their journey has been?
Yeah, I think if you're a top player in any of the centers in Canada, I think university coaches are reaching out to you and asking, because I've heard of quite a few examples of head coaches doing recruitment like that and looking at players, knowing players, are maybe involved themselves as a coach within the higher level academy pathway within Canada, so they already know local good players. They will be reaching out to those players to try and entice them to their university. I think on a very rare basis will a head coach not do that. I think that a lot of the universities out there, certainly in my experience when I was working in the last club I worked at, we were often getting visits from university coaches from BC. They would come over and want to run a session to get to know the players that we had at that age. And then from there, they would be reaching out and contacting and getting to know the players a little bit more. I think reaching out cold with an email about here's my video is not going to bring a lot of results, because I think the university coaches probably receive a number of emails like that they just simply can't get through them all. So yeah, making sure that you've either got somebody that's able to have that conversation on your behalf with the coach, or you're speaking to the coach yourself. You're going to watch them play and getting to know them a little bit. What type of style of football do they play? Would that be a good place for me? So yeah, if you're a good player, no matter what club you're at, what level, people will know you. I get calls quite often from different clubs here saying they have a really good player that'd be great for university level, and could I help them? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you're not playing APDL or whatever it is. You could play any level.
Yeah, there's a level for everyone in the game at the end of the day, whether it's amateur, professional, university, college, pick up with your friends in the park. There's a level for everyone in the game at some point. And I think if we dial that back into a maybe youth setting, and when I think about maybe the developmental context of the youth soccer journey, how important is it, in your experience, or maybe from what you've seen, to make sure that if I've got a child at home, that they're a great player or a good player maybe within their league, that they go and play with all the other good players into one team locally? Like, how important do you think that is from a recruitment, from a talent identification, from a talent development standpoint? That we need to have all of the best players playing together in one team in our local league. What tends to happen then in your experience, Chris, and maybe from your kind of agent's experience and lens?
Yeah, that tends to not be the best situation for you if you have a child in that exact scenario, where all the best players are congregated in the one team, because the importance of you getting older. If I go back to that part where the common theme that I get told when I'm discussing a player that's from Calgary, because we've got climatic restrictions on us that we can't play, every single week 11v11, that there's always a downfall when it comes to their understanding of big spaces, and their tactical understanding is less than other parts of the country. That is a theme that I hear quite often. Now, you would be taking the only games that you get on the actual field size and dimension that you're meant to play, around 20 a calendar year if you're lucky. You would then be playing against players that aren't really competitive for your child. So that would be the biggest hindrance for you. You wouldn't learn enough. You wouldn't be facing adversity. And the biggest thing that I would always encourage is you've got to be facing adversity. You cannot be better tomorrow than you are today without facing adversity and challenges and being put to the test every time you step on the field. So no, I think I have a lot of the people I know as well in the city, we would probably have a lot of headbutts when it comes to that type of question, because we each have different answers. But from my experience, it tends to be the worst thing for the player if they're always in and surrounded just by the best players, because you could go to a game and play 5 out of 10 and you're not tested. Your team will still win. You're better off, in my opinion, again, my perspective, you are better off being the best player in the team, where your child has to play at minimum 80% of their capability every single week. And there might be a question to that you could say, well, they need to train with good players. But if they are the best player in their team, by the time they get to that age of having to train with the best players, they're probably in one of the local higher streams that are available, either the Cavalry or in the past it was Vancouver Whitecaps had them. Then you would get that environment for you. So I would stay away from it. I think if you're the goalkeeper, you want to be on the worst team, without question. That's just, and as you go through the team, you need to be challenged. You need to be facing adversity. That's the only way I think that you've got any chance.
Yeah. And then, as long as it's a positive environment with a supportive coach that's, pushing and trying to really help your child, I think that those are key ingredients to be, forming the footballer of tomorrow at a good level. Super team doesn't necessarily mean that all of the scouts are coming to watch that one team. I can think back to working with Alberta Soccer, and there were good players in many clubs and many teams and in lots of geographical regions of this province that you can't just say, well, all of the best players come from this club when there's 2 or 3 from this center, or 5 from over there, or 2 from there. Good players come from wherever they come from, and really, like locally, if that kind of competitive atmosphere is there week in and week out, well, now we're going to have a better chance of actually developing these players game in and game out, as opposed to, as you said earlier, if you're winning games 5, 6, 8-0, there's nothing in it for you. If you haven't lost a game in 2 or 3 years, are you really being pressed? Are you developing? Are you having that adversity that's fairly critical to a developmental journey?
Yeah, it's such an important one. It's something as well where you can lose sight of it, because you can quickly get caught up in it all and say, well, winning is being better tomorrow than you were today, every day. And the only way you can do that is by being challenged and facing adversity, as you said, in a positive manner. And one example I had in the past is that I used to get the fear if the team I coached was one of the strongest teams in the league, and there was maybe one other good team, that would be the worst case scenario. It happened to me in one age group I coached, where we actually ended up putting 2 teams into the league from the collection of players I had. And we didn't make one strong team and one not so strong team. We numbered them on their current ability, 1 to 20, I think it was, and everybody odd went to this team and everybody even went to that team. And we tried our best to make it as unbalanced as we possibly could, because we were under the impression that those adverse moments and being challenged and will be the best thing for the child. They'll know that themselves as well. They want to feel tested, and there's nothing more empowering for a kid that does face a challenge and overcomes it. Then that is such a a fantastic feeling for them that they can go and build on in their life, not just as a soccer player, but in other aspects as well. So look, I think that the way that the education is going, and with the great people that are in Calgary leading clubs, I think that it will only end up getting to somewhere like that, where there's a consistent, strong game to play every single week, and there's no one club that you should go to. There's opportunities for you to go as close to home as you possibly can get.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. There's always moments when, players do end up going into high performance environments, or do end up going into, professional environments or programs, academies, whatever word that you want to call it. But typically that's not at U10, U11, U12, U13 kind of levels. And it's not the end all be all.
The next thing on top of that, our agency represents, let's say, 10 youth international players that have played either at a World Cup or have played for their country. And I could not tell you what they've won when they were 14 years old, what team they were playing in. Yeah, I wouldn't know any of that. I actually wouldn't have any way of being able to obtain that information unless I picked up the phone to them right now. So what they were doing at 14, not only will they not remember, in terms of what they were winning or what they were losing, but what they will remember by the time that they're 19, 20, and they're playing for their maybe playing for a top club and they're trying to be a professional, is what they learned during that time. It's not going to be the little gold medal that sat on the windowsill for a couple of years. That won't be remembered, and it's certainly not known for the people that matter to them at that time. None of the players I know, I know none of the stuff they were winning when they were 14 years old, or even if they were winning.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've got a box sitting in the basement full of medals and trophies and things that I can't remember when they were all from. Not saying they were all top level, but yeah, who knows when they were all from.
At least you have a
Yeah. My mom's probably actually got it, to be fair. She's the sentimental one. There's a question in the chat, and Chris, I'm gonna try to close this up a little bit here too. So if anyone's got any other questions, please chuck them in the chat now, and we'll make sure that we get to them here tonight. It says something about we're involved with, I don't know what that is, but they're giving my son the opportunity to play international 7v7 matches. Is this a good pathway?
Well, it's hard to say. I wouldn't want to comment too much on that because I don't know anything about that. What age would the player be? Where are you having to go to play 7v7? I'm assuming that you're highlighting a player that must be 10, 11, 12 years old if they're playing 7v7. Then I can't see a reason why you would need to travel for 7v7. You get them every single weekend here in Calgary. So, unless it's an unbelievable experience where Carlo Ancelotti is coaching you in that game, then I couldn't see a reason for you to do that. But again, I don't know any further information to that.
Yeah, and I think lots of context is missing, obviously, but in terms of pathway, that's just it's an opportunity to go play some games. So if that's a good fit for maybe your child, and there's a cultural exchange and there's learning that takes place in there as well, brilliant. Chris has outlined a lot of great information about, when clubs can bring players in from overseas and when players can move and how that process works. That, if it's to go in and experience Spain, France, Portugal, Andorra, Georgia, Italy, who knows, Brazil, Korea, it doesn't matter. But if it's to go and experience that, I mean, traveling is always a great education, if you can afford it, and it definitely enriches your life. So maybe that's the purpose of it in terms of leading to a professional contract or being identified or being scouted. I would say that the odds or the chances are probably quite slim based on, I think, what Chris has presented, and then also the realities of the game as well. Chris, would that be something that maybe you would echo?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. I think that there's always a reason why you can find a benefit to do it. And maybe your child is absolutely loves the game, and it's good for them to go and experience. Well, what is the competition elsewhere like, and what level do you need to be at for this to even be a possibility for you? So that in itself is an education for them, where they can get comparison to what they need to be doing. So there's many ways for it to work. If you've got the means to make it work, there's I'm sure it'll be beneficial to them, but it's definitely not a requirement that you need to go and do.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I had a last call out for questions, and I don't see any fingers typing furiously or anything else that's populated the chat box while we entered that one. Chris, I think there was a question in there as well. How can people contact you if they want? I'm assuming a quick Google will probably bring up Lamont, but how would they contact you?
Yeah, just my email would be the best one, which is just info@lamontsportsmanagement.com. So it's just the name of the agency, but not MGMT. It's the actual full word. So info@lamontsportsmanagement.com, and I'm happy to talk with anybody that wants any advice. I'm happy to help you at any time. If you need, feel free to reach out to me.
Excellent. Well, Chris, on behalf of everyone on the call, both that maybe haven't gone the distance with us tonight, but also those who have gone the distance, thank you so much for both sharing your knowledge, for sharing your experience, and for really trying to help people identify both credible kind of avenues and maybe steering away from some of the more nefarious aspects of the game as well, and really trying to wrap things up in a manner that puts the development in the hands of the child at the end of the day, of the player, and really tries to bring some awareness to the different levels and how this system all works, because there are rumors, there are myths, and trying to dispel those is sometimes a challenge while we chat to each other on sidelines as parents or as colleagues, as coaches, and really having the facts is important with this. So, Chris, I thank you for supplying all of that tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody that's been on the call and had to suffer listening to me for a long part of the evening. So hope you enjoy the rest of your night. And yeah, if anybody needs to speak to me at any time, happy to help. And Jordan, thanks for all you do in the game. You're going above and beyond. So wish you all the best with that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And so everyone, again, once we leave here tonight, fingers crossed that the recording has worked. We'll look to upload that onto YouTube if Chris allows us to as well. So we'll chat offline about that, and you can maybe look for it on the CMSA YouTube channel here in the coming days. Fingers crossed again, hopefully no technology problems from here on out to get that done. So thank you all. I'm going to end the meeting here tonight, and wish you all a great rest of your evening, and thanks so much.
Thanks everyone. Bye.